fees that you're paying for the use of ChatGPT's LLM, but the compute you're paying, and then storage. Like
Yes.
you're going to put your storage on Mongo, you're going to put it on like, the cloud large data centers. It's going to be really expensive.
What we've been seeing is that, you can now analyze like a video based on a policy. You can drop a policy, put the video in, and you can analyze like the entire video footage based on that policy. So there's a lot of safety and security applications. What are some of the applications that your companies are working on that are like you're extremely excited about, and that you think are going to really, really, really change the way companies do things?
Using to do something with it, especially when you're doing things that are customer facing, when you're doing things that like you're trying to gain insight from customers. Because the reality is, when I was back at that, as that entrepreneur in residence, we were bringing in companies that were doing graph databases and this and tying this together. And like, well, we could ask it the question. But I was like, guys, if the end user doesn't know what to ask,
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of What About AI Agents, show where we cover everything about where this technology is going, AI agents, and AGI and other tech. Today with us we have Adrian Mendoza. He's the founder of Mendoza Ventures. It's one of the first Latinx venture funds in Boston. They invest in sectors such as fintech, AI, cybersecurity. They back some companies like Sanso AI, Fiverr, and I'm sure Adrian will do a better job introducing himself than me, and we'd love to hear a little bit from your background, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Philippe. I appreciate it. Have been an early AI investor since 2016, so I've gone definitely through multiple waves of the ups and downs of AI. But also, prior to being in VC, I was a tech founder. So I built early AI expert systems, matching systems, segmentation systems. So I really come from the background of just building it myself and being the CTO and founder of businesses, to now looking at it from the technology side, but also looking at it more on the investment side and what are customers actually buying. So excited for the conversation.
Perfect. And I guess let's talk about what customers are actually buying and what are they looking for, because a lot of people who listen to us are looking for use cases or looking for areas where they can focus, where they can start building. And what are they buying, like from where you are sitting?
You know what? It's interesting because at the same time, like, kind of let's look at where we are in the market. Just a week ago, there was all these buzzes about DeepSeek and, oh my God, this is going to change everything. Well, guess what? ChatGPT just raised at a $300 billion valuation. I don't think they got affected by this. And you look at all these investors writing, drabbling on. And I was like, guys, have you actually used DeepSeek already? Because literally, I'll tell you, like, the R1, the new version of DeepSeek, I started using it and it starts rambling for 2 pages. And I was like, if I want to hear anyone rambling, I could listen to myself ramble on a podcast. I don't have to get an AI agent to do it for me. And so what we do is that as investors, we always use what's called a baseline question. And it happens to be the baseline question we use is a term set that says, who is VC Puppy? Which is this plush dog. It's clearly, if you look at the picture on the website, it is a plush dog. If you look at his Instagram, it's a plush dog. And so for years, we've seen like Gemini, we've seen Google Bard. Google Bard was the worst offender. It said that he was a real dog that was active in social media. And so there's just so much hallucination. And this is sort of our, one of our startups, Praxi.ai, that's in the infrastructure side, has an LLM leaderboard. And so what we do is we internally will sit and run the LLMs with our baseline question. And they're able to see. So when we did DeepSeek had no idea what he was. It's easy that if you were to look at cognitively look at the photograph and just use computer vision to analyze the photograph, you're like, this is a plush dog. This is fake. The last version of ChatGPT said that he went to Stanford and that he went to Harvard. I'm like, dude, it's a plush dog. And so part of it is, as we're looking at it from the investor side, one, you have to dig in to be like, what data sources are it using? DeepSeek's not using publicly available data sources. ChatGPT is starting with government first, and then it starts scraping the internet because it knows that the more that it ingests, the higher grade and possibility of hallucination, which is fine if you're on ChatGPT doing a Word doc on, tell me, like, I'm looking for a job description for a computer scientist, and there's millions of data points, or I'm planning my wedding or a trip, there's millions of data points. But when you're looking at healthcare, financial data, any semblance of hallucination is a failure. And that's really what the customers are seeing, the enterprises. We look at it from
Mm.
the enterprise. The enterprise is the first thing they're doing because, look, AI has been around since 2016. There has been, you know, businesses that we've invested in that are using fleets of data scientists, and most of the customers are like, it's okay. But like, what's got them excited was a prompt where you
Mm.
don't need a data scientist to tell you what's up. That your customer service person can just go in, type in the prompt, ask the question, and get the return. And we're just starting to see the use case swivel to a self-service model, but we're not fully self-service because the data is still 100% not there to be able to feed so that there's less hallucination.
Yeah, and they've been saying about the fact that they're running out of data to feed it,
Yeah.
and
Well,
and
part of it is it's these large LLMs that are
yeah,
consuming everything.
yeah,
I've said hundreds of times that the LLM that does a deal with Reddit and LinkedIn and Facebook is going to win because it just needs conversational data. And so you're starting to finally see this conversation of the SLM, the small language learning model, not the large, just small, that can be tactically focused on a portion of data that is like, tell me about healthcare data, tell me about claims data. What's, if you have a broken arm, like the cost of the doctor, the cost of the accident, like just that simple, small semblance of just really detailed focus that you can control.
and that's what I've been seeing as well. And the customers, they want something simple that works versus these large models that hallucinate a lot. To what you said was DeepSeek. I use it for coding sometimes, and it loves to ramble. And it sounds like a student when you ask it a question. It starts to, well, what do I say to him? He said to me this, and it starts to like give you all this internal logical thinking, which you might not find interesting or you don't care about. But I guess that was their kind of secret sauce or something that they were like their differentiator. To your point with this LLM identification, what we've been seeing is that you can now analyze like a video based on a policy. You can drop a policy, put the video in, and you can analyze like the entire video footage based on that policy. So there's a lot of safety and security applications. What are some of the applications that your companies are working on that are like you're extremely excited about, and that you think are going to really, really, really change the way companies do things?
Yeah, I think the first one is going back to self-service. So
Mm.
there is trying to put it in front of, so Senso.ai,
Mm.
AI agent specifically for customer support for banks. We
Mm.
have another AI agent specifically for customer support for credit unions because
Mm.
they're both very different. And so
Mm.
they're building SLMs so that someone in support can ask a question. Should I sell this person an auto loan? What is their credit score? So that you're taking not only the data of the customer, but also the product data of the bank and of the space. Like, should I give them financial advice? What should I tell them when time the bank is open? But they're going to be very different, and they're starting to look at other spaces in terms of like, all right, what other alternative finances? Do I get home loan? Do I get a car loan? Just spaces like this to be able to define out, that the data set is fixed, but it's also expert data. So that's one aspect. And then we have another company called Praxi.ai out of Silicon Valley that's now building a curation as a service.
Mm.
And they're building their agent and they're launching it on Amazon and Google so that a brand, any enterprise or an individual or an engineer can say, hey, I want to curate my data. Why don't I just take this agent, run it on my own instance, and then just as a consumption model, like use it as much as I want, but instead of being locked into a year contract, you could do it on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of on-premise will win out, especially for companies that really care about their data. And when we look into things like the cost of running LLMs, and if you want to just, let's use, let's say, OpenAI, let's use this, let's use that. Okay, great, we can use it. But you know what the price tag on real-time voice is? You know what the your price tag on all those things is? And sometimes companies don't understand it until you explain. And then,
Well, I was
as
going
you
to say,
mentioned,
Philippe, until they see the bill from
until they see the
AWS.
bill, then you
you
send
know,
them like, yeah,
so years ago when I was a CTO of a business, we were building a microservice architecture, and
right,
it was like really beautiful. Like things were launching, things were collapsing, and so then we were approached by service providers like New Relic, and they were like, hey, well, you should have continuous monitoring on all of your cloud instances. And I was like, what's the cost? And they're like, oh, monthly cost is $50 a month. And I was like, dude, my instance costs me $10 a month.
right.
Why am I paying 4 times more than what I'm using on AWS? And they were like, oh, you're right. And it's going to happen with a lot of these people who are going to say, oh, I'm going to use an instance of ChatGPT. And then all of a sudden, the compute power that you're using is going to be, not only the fees that you're paying for the use of ChatGPT's LLM, but the compute you're paying and then storage. Like
Yes.
you're going to put your storage on Mongo, you're going to put it on the cloud large data centers. It's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, and I guess it's the cost of convenience, and people are willing to pay that cost, and a lot of people will, at smaller scale, not feel it as much. But when you're talking about large call centers that handle, I think, what is it, like 2,000, 3,000 phone calls a day, imagine the cost of support for that, or like running real time voice with consecutive, like hundreds of agents. It can really rack up a bill. That can really rack up that cost. To your point. But
Well,
a lot of people don't want to deal with also complexities of managing that infrastructure and managing all these things, because then you have to hire people to manage the actual infrastructure. Or
and Philippe, one of the other things is the cost of training the LLM with your
yeah,
data is
yeah,
really expensive.
yeah.
So one of our startups, Praxi, this is a great founder. He said, hey, I've got my agent. I have to train it with data,
Hmm.
but I'm going to pay $10,000, $20,000 on AWS to just sit there and crunch millions of data records. The training is going to break us. So what did he do? He set up a data center in his house, running on NVIDIA chips that he got as being part of NVIDIA's program. And then he did all of the training on all of the models there, and then releases the agent back into the wild. And then every month does another set of real time training data,
Mm.
because part of the power of the agent, which no one is talking about yet, is the feedback loop. Because if you have the agent running and you've trained it and you paid for the compute to train it, and you have like your support, use case, 10,000 agents using it, if there's no feedback loop in real time, you have no idea whether or not the predictions and what it's giving you are actually accurate. And so you have to start building a feedback loop so that someone can say, like, all right, if you gave it to this customer, did they use it? Was it accurate? To try to minimize the hallucinations, but also show that that suggestion and that prompt was actually successful.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it a little bit at large language model scale with Claude, where Claude did a lot of reinforcement learning on computer programming, and that's why it is still like a preferred LLM in platforms like Cursor and Windsurf. Developers tried everything, OpenAI, O3, everything, and then they just go back to Claude because they did reinforcement learning and they really trained their model well on coding. It performs very well. And to your point, at smaller scale, a small LLM or SLM, which is trained on the specific customer data with reinforcement learning, where you have that feedback loop. of how to properly answer those queries will outperform any generic LLM that's connected to like a vector database at any point, right? It's just going to be on top. It will know your business very well, and it will uh, perform these tasks really, really, really well. And what I'm trying to, sorry.
Philippe, and I was going to say you were right on the money. And the more you use it, the better it gets.
Yeah.
That's the key of it. The more that you engage it with your specific data set, and the agent and the user of the agent is then feeding it sort of positive, negative in terms of responses, and you have that feedback loop in place, it's going to like outperform hands down any of the large LLMs that are out there.
100%. I think that's where like the market is not yet at right now. So I'm guessing you're backing these companies because you see it as a big enterprise use case, and I see it by like the discussions we are having with different enterprises now all revolve around something similar, or in different sectors from manufacturing to healthcare. It's the same. It's the same kind of discussion. Like, how do we keep our data secure, safe, and do we really need to pay as much money as you say we do to run these large models at scale for us? And the answer is no.
No, but I think the other thing is it really requires the employees of these businesses to use it. So I'll use a good example. So I was a tech founder. I ran an analytics business.
Mhm.
And we had like at the height of it, we had data scientists and engineers, and we had this guy that was like prior to working with us, he was the head of global analytics at HP, and you know he would take the data, and there'd be box plots and whiskers, and look, nobody cared. They were looking at this, and you're like, you had to explain what the box plot was. You had to explain what the whiskers were. You had to, you know, talk about statistic significance. The reality is people would take the report and be like, all right, this is great. All right, what do you want me to do with it? And now it's like, no, if you just put the same thing on a prompt and someone asks the questions and it generates an answer, and then they're like, hey, here, you know, what are my top 10 users that I should call back from the call center? And you generate a list, they download it, and it gives it to them. That's exactly it. Not saying, oh, well, the top quartile list over here, and you know, you're looking at, you know, sentiment over here. No, you got to tell them what to do, and it's got to be super easy, because the more you use it and you start engaging them, that's going to sort of bake it into the workflow of the business, and that's actually where a lot of analytics businesses failed in the last 20 years because it never really became a core part of the workflow. You know, I'll even talk about a good example. Like in my prior life, I worked with a lot of brands, and they would call me and say, well, we don't really know our customer. And it's like, guys, you have Google Analytics. It's telling you where they're coming from, who they are, what websites refer to it. They didn't even know what Google Analytics was. And this is like 10 years ago.
Well, Google Analytics is so complex. I don't blame them. But like you even have these companies, they bought Tableau, right? And they went and they built a bunch of those reports. They hired a bunch of data scientists. They build those KPIs, and then nobody looks at it. And this data just sits there dormantly, being gathered, and you have it visualized in some way, but it's not a good way. It's not sensible. To your point, it looks cool, but can we really what you're trying to say is that with LLMs we'll now be able to answer more pertinent questions, because these charts and dashboards are great, but they don't answer like core deep questions that an executive may have when they need some information, because ultimately analytics is about getting intelligence about my company, right?
Well, and it comes down to really, it goes back to, I'll use a good example. So in 2015, I was the entrepreneur in residence at one of the largest insurance companies in the country. And so what I always like to say is, you know, analytics is the past, the present is reporting, the future is predictions. And so they were really interested in predictions. Like, where are things going? You know, credit ratings, finance, stocks, mutual funds, insurance products. And so we started talking to a lot of these business units, and and this is like 2015. This is not that long ago. Hey, how do you look at your data? And they're just staring at me and they're like, here's a printout. Wait, what are you talking about? Well, we get the day's data on paper. They're like, what about the day before? Well, we don't see that. What about what the potential of the next day is? So we built a system where we ingested a month's, 6 months of data, put it on an iPad, and the guy was like, this is incredible. I could now see for this security 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and compare it against today. And I said, great. How about we give you what it could be tomorrow and trending lines, and we could predict where it's going to intersect with here and there. And they're like, no, we're good. We're happy. You just gave us something that we didn't even know we can have. And why am I going to think about what I want, what I don't even want? And it was really funny because it was like, guys, no, you don't understand. We're trying to help the business. And they were like, they were just happy to have the data in front of them. The reality is a lot of enterprises are still in that spot. And that's why there is still a massive opportunity in the enterprise space for digital transformation. And I'm talking about insurance companies, financial services. I'm talking about manufacturing. I'm talking about, everything that runs the world and the structures, because we forget that most of us that listen to podcasts, we're at the height of technology. We're at the height of, software as a service and consumption models, and how do we run an instance out of AWS? Is it Docker? Is it not Docker? Is there a load balancer? Like, the reality is most of the enterprises aren't there. It's on-prem. It's in a data center in-house. There's one guy that's guarding it because that's his pet project. And this is what I have to remind people is there's still massive digital transformation that has to happen.
Yeah, and people misunderstand, and in a lot of cases, people don't even want to move their data to the cloud because they don't trust it. They have security, they have compliance, they have existing systems, they have audits in place, and it's hard to move. It's not like you can do it like that easily. But to your point, I have exactly the same experience when I was working in my private career before I started to do like companies, and I would come in and we would do analytics at a certain company. We would analyze, we'd show them some charts and dashboards and say, okay, so let's do some predictive analytics. Let's understand trends. And they're like, we don't want to understand trends. We don't want predictive. We don't care about that. Just give me the picture of what it is like now. And I'm like, but what are you going to do with it? Like, you can't operate like that. But they could and they did. And that was their bread and butter. So to your point, I think there is a lot of room to innovate in this space. So how do you think LLMs will help shape the future of predictive analysis and forecasting and my decision making for companies?
I think part of it is that big crossover from the LLM to the SLM. I think right now it's the fear that we're seeing is how do we bring it in-house? How do we bring it so that we're consuming our data? Because they realize, look, for most brands and enterprises, they think they're not touching LLMs, but they are. Their employees have already started throwing their work product up into ChatGPT to format it. So it's already happened. This leakage of private data is already starting to fall into the large LLMs. Right now, what they have to do is try to control it. And what's interesting is that at a board level, I sit on 5 boards for different companies. Everyone is talking about what is our AI strategy. Even on the cybersecurity side, they're not talking about their cybersecurity strategy. They're talking about our AI strategy first because they know this leakage of data is happening. And they also know that they have to do something that, whether it's, helping out the workforce be more efficient, but also finding a way of taking this massive mountains of data that they're using to do something with it, especially when you're doing things that are customer facing, when you're doing things that like you're trying to gain insight from customers. Because the reality is when I was back at that, as that entrepreneur in residence, we were bringing in companies that were doing graph databases and this and tying this together. And like, well, we could ask it the question. But I was like, guys, if the end user doesn't know what to ask, how do we literally can prompt them? And that's the important part is we've got to win the hearts and minds of the person that's going to touch it. That's the key thing. And stream it down to the easiest of the easiest. It's why Senso is building these small little agents for specific tasks. Because that person that's a customer support, and they're at a bank or a credit union, they don't need info on credit ratings or this stock over here or this policy over there. They're just focused on that piece of it. And I think that's going to be the more that we get more agents that are specifically able to help, but also get people out of this view that we have right now where it is software as a service. There's one long contract. I've been telling for years that the consumption model is going to change that. Like a cell phone plan. I buy an agent, I have a number of asks, there's a number of consumption, and that's going to change everything. It's why I was pretty excited at what Praxi did to say, we're going to do a small agent, we're going to release it out, and then people can download it, try it for a month, and if they don't like it, they get rid of it. If they do like it, they can buy a year contract. And I think we're going to start seeing business models change because VCs are so stuck on this idea of ARR and, I got to have a 1 to 2 year contract. Dude, these agents are going to change in 1 to 2 months. Like, you can't get someone tied into a platform when they really just want to work on something small for their people.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, smaller agents, one of the other benefits that they bring is that they don't know anything about the outside world. We were doing a project with a credit union in the Middle East, and they were trying to use an LLM, and that LLM was basically recommending their competitors to their customers. So their customers, they're like, so how do I open a checking account? Well, the competitor has a great option for that checking account. And you're like,
Exactly.
and then you're like, well, because it's trained on everything, it knows everything. So
Yeah,
that's
you hit the nail on the head. You're drowning in data. And the
right.
reality is we have to scale it back to be like, look, there is a place for LLMs. There's a place where I'll tell you a good story. Like my son is in middle school, and they actually have access to ChatGPT to ask it questions, like history questions. And then they have the citation now. ChatGPT just added citations of where the source came. And they're able to go in and engage it because they're asking these big, what's the height of Mount Kilimanjaro? What's this? What's that? Like,
Right.
that's where it's helpful. And then you're starting to see Gemini being added on top of Google searches because there's so much garbage that you need something to filter out the noise. And so I think when you're looking at these large apps, when you're looking across a competitive landscape, you don't have time to go through every competitor, but you now have, some system. I think what we're going to end up seeing is what happened on the internet. It's, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you could find the top 10 things, and then we start getting paid search. I think the reality is, as that business model of OpenAI changes and evolves, we're going to start seeing like paid placements. We're going to start seeing more of that because I realize there's a massive revenue opportunity. And that's where the LLMs are going to fall flat on their face. And those that have found their own SLMs that are able to control them and build them on their own, they're going to provide massive value because they're going to be worth it across all the competitors.
Right. And these SLMs are much easier to build. Like, there's entire Reddit communities dedicated to that. One of my co-founders, he's always lurking there, and they're always like writing new small like SLMs. And because it's not as difficult to build. You just need the data to train it on, and it's just as good. And to your point, they're gonna start running those ads. And if you have those enterprise implementations where you're using ChatGPT or where you're using one of those, you might have to pay premium for them not to run ads.
It's you hit the nail on the head. It's what we see from the investment side. We look at a lot of companies and we start digging in to be like, what LLM are you using? And they're going to start telling us, I'm using this one. I said, at a certain point, when you consume a lot, you're going to get shut down.
Yeah.
At a certain point, or the cost of using it is going to outweigh the cost that you're getting, and the margins are going to fall apart. I was talking to the bank yesterday about things like Synapse. When you look at the fintech side, there was banking as a service, and what these banking as a services realized is that the more people used it, the more it was integrated into these applications. So people started charging more. And that ended up hurting the margins of those fintechs and startups. And that's really what can happen. And what will happen is that these large LLMs are going to realize that at a certain point, when you consume more, you're going to start getting charged more because the cost of compute is going to get more and more expensive for them. And so I think that's what we're going to start seeing is people building undefensible moats. And that's really for us what we look at every day when we look at companies. Like, what is defensible about what you have? The SLM is defensible. If you have an SLM, you can spin it up really quickly. It's, as you said, low cost. You can have a data set that's yours or it belongs to a customer. You can federate that data set to add more to it. That's really what's going to be the sort of the big push into it. And it's interesting because when you look back a la 2016, early in AI, there was the concept of the model factory, where you have a model, it's in the cloud, you have people that get to use it, consume it, and then create an output. And that's really all that agents are copied, is this model factory concept. The nice thing that we're going to see is, it's interesting because when you look back 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when Docker came out, the ability, people used it, and there was, the Docker guys and the leaderboards talking about, oh man, this is which instance are we going to use? It's until it get ingrained into Amazon Web Service, where you can now buy an instant and say, oh, I want it pre-loaded with Docker. Then that's what took it off. That's what it became an industry standard. And that's what's going to happen to the agents. Those early agents that get themselves into AWS, that gets themselves into the Google Store, into Azure, that are like, this agent is for insurance. This agent is for community banks. And then people could just download them, use them. That's who's going to be the winner.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of getting yourself into those stores is that, for example, I know Microsoft will have their sales teams go to their customers and sell your product for you. If you get yourself into those stores and you have those agents that are specifically for a specific sector. And so we are talking about small horizontal language models that are specific to a specific industry or sector, trained and have that experience, will outperform just generic solutions building on large language models and LLMs. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's really, really, really interesting where this tech is going. So where do you think the future of this technology holds? Like, are we going to get AGI? Are we going to reach singularity? When do you think singularity is coming? When are AI gods going to rule over us?
You know what? It doesn't even know who VC Puppy is yet. It doesn't understand. There's not enough, cognitive cognition that, oh, this is a plush picture of a plush dog. Like, when we get that understanding of consuming images and looking at the page and understanding the details of it,
right.
It's interesting because for years people are like, oh my God, AI is coming for us, and look at Terminator and the evil AI. And I'm like, how's that going to happen? We don't have in the US specifically, identity isn't tied to a central identity system. The majority of computers that the government uses are 286s and 386s. Like, we don't have this capacity. Like, going to the driver's license is they're still on terminals using like data centers. Like, the fact that literally the old fashioned data centers from the 90s and like hardware compute is still a thing. Like, we're not there yet. Like, there has to still be this ability to transform everything, but we're far fetched from them taking over and ruling the world. Again,
weren't like those nuclear launch codes on those large floppy disks they were complaining
oh yeah,
about.
exactly. Like,
how's
it gonna do? It's got to get
the AI going to take that over
in there. Yeah, it's like we're there still. I mean, people understand that like the space shuttle was run on 286s, not because that was it. Like, like your phone can launch, the satellite to space. That has 100 times more compute than what the space shuttle ran on, and it took like a crew of 8 to circled around the orbit of the Earth.
Yeah. Like the computers they had in the 60s are like nothing compared to what we have now, and then what we're using it for, like watching memes on TikTok and stuff.
That's exactly it.
That's exactly it.
It was funny because one of my associates asked me about my first startup. And what we ended up doing is we built the world's first mobile distributed computing platform, and we used it to test web pages.
Well, there you go. There
There
you
you
go.
go. So we're not there yet. I'm hoping we're there. It's why I test the LLMs every other week, every other month, asking it our baseline question. I'm waiting for the day to say, Adrian, stop asking. He is a plush dog.
It's not able to recognize. I thought it. I think it
No.
should be. We do a lot of video analytics. It's pretty good. Like our video analytics stack is pretty
Yeah.
decent.
There's an Instagram account called @VCPuppy with
At,
pictures of this plush dog.
at
Like
VC
the
Puppy.
fact that it's not going through, there's enough information that it should recognize that we're
Interesting. I'll check it out. I think
yeah.
it's rather interesting because I would think our vision tech would catch it, but we were talking to some one of the large car rental companies, and they implemented some old school vision tech so that it would recognize the like plate numbers as the cars got returned. And some people were able to fool it by just printing the plate number on a shirt and walking in, and
Yeah,
just like
absolutely. I
there
mean,
you go.
that's the thing about, but it goes back to it's looking for these are dumb expert systems. Yeah. It's not recognizing this is a person wearing the shirt. This is not a car. And that's, I think, where we're still not there is that we know enough to recognize letters and, using OCR and all this, computer vision, but we're not there to say, what is the overall context? So perfect example, Photoshop, last year launched their editing tool for Photoshop. And you could grab a thing and it does a fantastic job. Once in a while, when you say remove this from the background, it gives you a random object. And it's just not there yet to understand. No, when I ask you to remove this object from the background, I want it to create a clear background. And that's, I think, where we are. And it works, 50, 60% of the time.
Yeah.
But it's all about the context of looking out of the area into just further the whole picture. And that's what I think we're still missing.
Yeah, and hallucinations are fine in some areas, but we tried to apply vision to quality assurance. We're working with a manufacturer, and we said, well, we can also do quality assurance. And they're like, well, look, they've done like a lot of training. It's an auto manufacturer, so they've trained their models quite extensively on vision, and they said we spent a lot of money on that, and we only got to 95%. And it's not 100%, and it will hallucinate and it will make mistakes, and you cannot make mistakes like in areas, let's say, like quality assurance or manufacturing for cars, because that can lead to fatal accidents that you can't that you're liable for. So to your point, this tech is not there yet, but it is improving massively and quickly at a very rapid pace, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Well, and that's where that with a collection of SLMs, I think what we're going to end up seeing is SLMs leading the charge. And I can predict in the next 1 to 2 years, people then building an LLM using a collection of SLMs of data. And then that way, the SLMs get trained. They could get recycled with their data. They can get updated. They can refresh. And then you have an overarching LLM that can just learn across all of these training data sets.
And
Because,
it will be much more accurate.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because the biggest issue that goes back to like my time in analytics, in order to get statistical significance, you need 10,000 data points.
Yeah.
Every time you do something. Every time there's a signal, you need 10,000 data points of that signal, because without it, that's how you get hallucination.
Yeah. Yep. And it's hard to do it when it's trained on a very, very arbitrary data set like Reddit or LinkedIn or like comments or YouTube videos. And it's not, and it will hallucinate and will make mistakes and it will generalize or it will overgeneralize. And it's just a matter of just the data set being too large or too untargeted.
Completely agree.
So, and finally, so for young entrepreneurs looking to pitch you, what are you, what does your fund look for in entrepreneurs? What are you trying to who are you trying to back? What kind of technologies? What are you interested in?
Yeah. I mean, for me, we invest in technology companies that are at the B2B level.
Mhm.
Those, and so what I love is a founder that knows a space that where they're a domain expert, where
Mhm.
they can look at whether it be fintech or AI or cybersecurity or a space in manufacturing where they know the space, they have spent time in that space, and they figured out the problem and they're building a solution to solve it.
Mhm.
And so that's really, for me, it's about getting someone that has seen it from the inside,
Mhm.
has that like domain expertise, and is like, no, really, I know that there is a massive opportunity for innovation. But also, like, the more you come to me with not just an idea, but we've got a customer, a first customer, the first three customers, and look, and we can talk to them, to be like, we didn't trip over the revenue, but that it's, we're building something that these enterprises are looking to buy and are even funding it. That's
Mhm.
for me what gets me excited, because it's, especially with these, technologies and spaces, the more you get someone that really understands it and walks in and says, I know, I have lived that problem,
Right.
then that's exciting.
So if you are in that space, just reach out to Mendoza Ventures. I'm sure you can send them a cold email. How do you like to be approached? Is cold email okay, LinkedIn,
So
or do you prefer warm intros?
I am all about a warm intro. And when people do, people forget that raising money is a sales cycle.
Yeah.
And the more you customize that intro to say, hey, I heard you on Philippe's show. I have an SLM. Hey, I am a domain expert. The more you tailor it, you're more likely get a response, because we get hundreds of emails a day
Yeah.
in like every channel. LinkedIn, I have 350 like invites that I haven't accepted or looked at. So like, and the ones that I look at are the ones that are like tailored. I saw you on this show. I am a listener of Philippe's show. I have this idea, blah blah blah, and they tailor it. That's who gets a phone call, and that's who gets an email.
Yep. Makes sense. And when is too early for you? Like when should they know that it's not time yet? When they should still think and figure it out before they come and approach?
So I like when someone's revenue positive. When
Uh-huh.
they're at like past 500,000 of revenue, that means that I didn't trip over it, or it's not a POC. But
Hmm.
you're right at that inflection point of starting to like be like that. I know what it's going to take to get 1 million in revenue. That's
Mm.
what's really exciting for us, because the next three businesses we're going to invest in are founders that have actually, for the last couple of years, have been like, I'm at 300, I'm at 500, I'm at 1 million, I'm at 1.5 million. And then they update us on, and take an initial call. And it's great because we follow them along in their early stage journey. And now
Mm.
that, then we're, we know them, we know the market. I had a founder that I've known for a year who always sends me updates. He just got to 1 million in revenue, and I just put him together next to one of my portfolio companies and said, you guys should do business together. And I think you would help each other out. And they're already starting to talk, which is pretty exciting for me.
And I think many entrepreneurs miss this part where, like, let's say they take a meeting with you and you say no. It doesn't mean no, it means just send updates. Tell us how you're improving, growing, because you need to see how they do, right? Because if you tell them no and they quit, then what's the point of
Yeah.
like that's not the person you're looking for.
Philippe, but also you have to match it to what we invest in. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
someone sent our analysis of fizzy pineapple juice. And I was like, dude, we don't invest in fizzy pineapple juices. We don't invest in any pineapple juices or juices and consumer products. Like, and then
right,
founder was adamant about like, I want to meet with you guys. I want to pitch you guys. I'm like, dude, we don't invest in this space. So I'm
right.
like, we're an AI fund. Like, we're not doing this. And then they were all sort of bothered about it. But I was like, you've got to always match the ask to the right person.
Yep, yep. Because like, how can you help them? Like, how can you help them sell juice? Like, you don't have access to distributors, manufacturers. Like, it's a whole different business. B2B. If you do finance and banking, you can give intros to those people, like in those areas. But if you are in a different like industry, like healthcare, probably you don't have as many connections in that space, so
Yeah,
it's harder to help the
absolutely.
company.
I mean, that's the thing that we look at is like, where can we provide as much value? And look, I did this. I was a founder.
Yeah.
It's all about who provides the best value, because we had great investors. We also had investors that we never heard from ever again. And I was like, look, I appreciate your money, but like, how's it going? And so for us, it's like, can we provide value? Can we, and more importantly, do you also match with the companies that we've invested in? The
Mm.
really good founders are like, we're a complement to this company. We think we're a complement to this company over here. But also, like, a good founder also looks at our portfolio and says, oh, I think this is competitive and it doesn't make sense. Why should I pitch you? Because we've had people like 3 different times that are competitors to one of our portfolio companies pitch us. And I'm like, guys, I don't want to see this. Like, you're a competitor. No, I want to pitch you. I was like, I don't want to look inside the covers. Like, I'm fine.
No, it makes sense, especially if you're not Y Combinator that likes to back competing companies. Like if you bet on a company, you want that company to go to 1 billion, and if you bet on 3 of companies in the same like area, they'll all go to 100 million. That's not good for you,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's what the value funds do. It's like, we'll invest in everybody. I'm like, dude, if that's what you want, go do
Everybody gets a dollar. Yeah. All right. Well, um, so I guess to wrap this up, it was really great to have you on the show, Adrian. Really a pleasure. Apologies for some issues that I'm having with the camera today, but it was a great conversation. Really happy to have you on the show. Be happy to see you again, maybe in a year or so. See how things have changed from for you. And this is Adrian Mendoza, Mendoza Ventures. They invest in diverse founders, immigrant backgrounds. So if you have an SLM and you're building something in a targeted horizontal space, especially close to security and fintech, reach out to them. And thank you so much for joining the show today, Adrian. It's been a
Thank you for
pleasure.
having me, Philippe. It's been a blast, and yeah, I'll take you up on it in a year. Let's do it, and let's see what's changed.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thanks, Philippe.